guys, I just wanted to share a short devotional with you that came to me as I was praying and reading this morning. The main thought I want to express is found in 1 Corinthians 10:31, which says, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God." You've probably heard this verse before. The verse implies a massive truth about Christianity, and that is that Christianity is about living our whole lives for God's glory. I think this is a really important thing for us to consider, and a really important thing for us to consider right now, because many of the activities that we typically associate with Christianity have been taken away from us because we're not gathering physically right now. Because of these unique circumstances, I think it's a good time to ask the question, have I placed too much importance on church attendance or church activities? Now, let me be clear here that church attendance and church activities are good things given to us by God to help us in becoming more like Christ. And the New Testament really doesn't have a category for a Christian who isn't a part of a Christian community. Okay, so it's really important for us to gather as Christians, and that's why we're adamant that this is a temporary thing. This is not going to last forever, because we do need to gather as Christians. However, church services and gatherings are not the essence of Christianity. That's not what Christianity is. It isn't going to church. That's not the whole of Christianity. We're not called to be like Jesus on Sundays and Wednesday nights, and then we just kind of do whatever we want. Beyond that, we're called to be like Jesus with our whole lives. We're called to glorify God with everything we do. So on the one hand, if you're feeling the sting of not having youth group or church services, that's good and that's right, because Christians need other Christians, like I said. On the other hand, if not being able to gather for church has become an excuse for hitting pause on following Jesus for you, then I would encourage you to have a conversation with the Father about where your heart is really at. It may be worthwhile to call to memory what your life looked like before the coronavirus lockdown. Were you seeking Jesus 7 days a week then? Or were you seeking him 1 day a week and following the crowd for the other 6 days? It's a good question to ask, I think. To close, I want to remind you of what is perhaps the least known, well-known part of Jesus' Great Commission from Matthew 28. Jesus called us to make disciples of all nations and baptize them. Those are pretty familiar to us. But he also called us to teach them everything that I have commanded you. That's a quote. Jesus said, teach them everything that I have commanded you. That's the other part of the Great Commission. In fact, I don't think you can call people disciples unless that's going on, unless they're being taught everything that Jesus taught about what it meant to follow him. That's a pretty tall order, right? Teach them everything that Jesus commanded. And I would argue that that's actually a lifelong process of discipleship, okay? But think of the kinds of things that Jesus commanded his disciples, okay? Did he command them to meet once a week for some songs and a sermon? No. Those are good things. Again, those are good things and a benefit, I think, to Christian discipleship, to Christians following Jesus. But that's not what he never commanded his disciples to do those things specifically. He commanded them to do things like be reconciled to each other as opposed to being angry with each other. Be humble in your generosity, unlike the religious people of the time who love to show off how generous they're being to the poor. And love one another. And that's probably a fair summary of all of Jesus' teachings, is to love one another and love the world around us. In short, he commanded his disciples to be like him with their whole lives. That's what Jesus commanded them to do, to use their whole lives to be like him, to become like him. In fact, Romans is going to say, right, Romans 8 is going to say, 8:29 is going to say that God predestined those whom he foreknew to be conformed to the image of his Son, Jesus. That's the whole goal of being saved, is for us to be like Jesus, to become like Jesus in all of our lives, with all of our lives. So, we aren't coming together for our weekly meetings right now, and that's a bummer and something that we look forward to changing in the near future. But think about this. If Christianity is about doing everything to the glory of God, then we still have 6 days a week where the essence of following Jesus hasn't changed at